Drawn with this triangle here, I'll explain that in a bit, but there's a break, there's a transition between this letter and this letter. Of course, you'd never know that in English. But anyway, the concept of the psalmic, they say the word prop. I mean, we go, well, wait a minute. A trellis, like for a rose bush, you know, where you have lattice work, that's like a prop. But so if you have a tree that needs to be supported with the stake and tied to it, that's a prop. But so is a propeller that spins to make the boat go. Right? That's a prop. So what kind of prop is it? I think it's both. Because on the one hand, one of the ancient forms of writing a psalmic is like that. Well, to me, that looks like the wake of a propeller in the water. And you could say, well, wait a minute, that's a modern invention. They didn't have that in the days of the Phoenicians in ancient Israel. Well, we don't necessarily know that. As a matter of fact, the Phoenicians were known as the seafaring people whose empire influenced the entire world. And they might well have had a prop, for all I know. The prop's not that hard to figure out, actually, in terms of engineering. But anyway, the other way of drawing a prop is like that, which kind of looks like a trellis. Interesting, at the end of our street, they just put up a brand new power pole, one of these big main things, and it looks exactly like this. This thing's probably 60 feet tall. I mean, it's just this giant electrical power. The wires run. I mean, right at the end of the road, there's this giant psalmic. So you could think of it as a power pole because it facilitates the electrical wires being run, and we'll get to that in a minute. You could also think of it as a watchtower. You know, you climb this thing to stand up there and look with your spyglass. And I'll get to reasons for that in a bit. But I'm just trying to show you some images that are related to that shape of the psalmic. So when you see the psalmic, you think about what the psalmic means. The ion is an eyeball. It's also if you have a well, with that you get water out of, it's a deep well with a spring down below. It's also a fountain that shoots water out like a geyser. It's both. It's not one or the other. So, like the eye is you can see the depth of the soul in the eye. So the other thing about the ion is it's understanding, it's insight, it's knowledge, it's being able to put things together, it's being able to judge and make a discernment between things. So the eye has to do with being able to see, but it's also these other things which are tied to, you might say, analogies or metaphorically speaking of what an eye represents. A pay then is the mouth. Right? So you can easily see that. That pays the mouth, right? So again, these are like the simplest shapes, and these are all legitimate shapes. I didn't make these shapes up. These are shapes that have been found on various inscriptions somewhere through the period of time, but yet, again, according to Benner or Seekins, one might be from 2000 BC and the other one might be from 1000 BC or somewhere in between. You know, and it almost doesn't matter because it's simply the ancient form. Let me say one other thing about this ancient form. I was talking to one fellow who his whole life is regarding these letters, and he said that, actually it was his wife, she said that they have no regard of the paleo because these represent Canaanite gods. Now that's their disposition. That they represent Canaanite gods. The god represented by the bull, I mean, Aaron got in trouble for making a golden bull, right, at the base of Mount Sinai. And whether it's a camel god and the god of portals, the god of enlightenment, whatever it is, as far as they're concerned, these so much look like objects that they want nothing to do with them, because there's a commandment that says, make no image of anything in heaven above and earth beneath, or that are in the seas under the earth. Therefore, because the paleo letters look like objects, that's why these are called flame letters. They don't look like objects, they're like flames. And what I was about to say before, at the letter Yod, this shape here, is that this is like a flame point. And this is like a flame point. You go from a flame is like a spark of life, and then it disappears. So that's also like this flame. So the Chaldean flame letters, like I said, Daniel was the chief Chaldean, the chief magi. But that's why they're called flame letters. So in this particular font, I tried to make the point to put this little flame flourish on the top of each letter, because they said that the significance of the Hebrew is that you'll see these little flame flourishes, which some people call tittles, jots and tittles. The jots, people say, are the smallest letter, like the Yod, and the tittles are the flourishes that are on the letters, like the little flame points. Well, according to some research that Monty Judah has done, he has a different opinion, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, one of the other sessions. But anyway, the point is, there's something about the flame quality which is more ethereal. Therefore, it's kind of conceptual and not material, not object. These are object related, these are more concept ethereal. And the point of going back to the paleo is to have a mechanism of translation that we're going to get to regarding Daniel. Okay, so the pei is the mouth. The zadi is a fish hook. So, again, that's a pretty basic shape. If you have a spear or like a pike with a hook on it, or like a can opener, or a fish hook with a barb, it's basically the zadi shape. Kuf, if you look at Jeff Benner's kuf, there's a horizon, and there's the sun on the horizon. And what that implies is basically the day's over, evening's coming, it's going to be night. We're at the point of transition. Or it's been night, the sun's just coming up, again, we're at the point of transition. So the kuf speaks about the point of transition. It's also the back of the head. So in the modern, this is the neck, here's the back of the head. The front of the head would be out here. But the kuf shape is the back of the head. It means that which follows. So as you walk past, the thing that follows you is the back of your head, or your heel. So in Yaakov, Jacob, he has this letter kuf, or Q in his name, not the letter C that we would have in English, because his heel, he grabbed at Esau's heel. Whether he was pushing his heel away from kicking him in the head, the way Brad Scott suggests, which sounds pretty good, it might be true, or he was grabbing at his heel, trying to usurp or supplant Esau's birthright, may be true. Nevertheless, the letter kuf is in his heel. I think there's another meaning which is much more wonderful than either of those two, which we'll get to in a little bit. But that's the letter kuf. Resh is then the head of a man. So again, here's his neck, and here's his head. It's also like a flag. That which flies, that which says, okay, here's the place. Here's our territory. This is where we rule. So the Resh is the exalted man, or the prime man, the lifted up one. Now the Gimel has a neck which lifts up, and so it's said that the Gimel is the letter which represents pride, because its head is lifted up. Well, the Resh, his head is also lifted up. So in the different letters, there's other letters, which we'll get to in a few minutes also. Sheen is teeth. So you could say, well, fire has teeth, and fire, but if you eat, you have teeth, which in your mouth. So again, it's that primitive shape. And then Tav, if you have an agreement, you have a contract, and somebody says, okay, here's all the terms of the contract. sign here. And if you don't sign, if you can't write, if you're illiterate, you can just simply write an X, and that counts as an official signature. So X, since ancient days, the shape of the X has always meant, here's the end of the matter, I agree. So the sign of the ancient Tav is the sign of a contract, a covenant, an agreement, and your willing participation in the terms so stated. Okay, so just as a quick question here, does anybody have any issue or trouble with understanding the meanings of the letters as they're drawn so that you can look at the letters and kind of know what they mean? So everybody's kind of at least up to that speed of comprehension, right? Okay, great. And we'll go from there. Again, like I say, it's foundational and critical to at least be there together. Now, let's look at the paper that Audrey gave, that she wrote up. What she did, a couple years ago, I wrote down a list of things the way I saw them. And then she took some of Jeff Benner's and Frank Seekon's, and she's compiled them together. And that's these papers here. So what you have there is a compilation of what each letter represents. Now, at the level that we just went through, that's what that is. Okay, so, but I don't think that level is going to get you much further than understanding these right here, which is the modern, which is kind of the esoteric meaning. Now, I'm going to show you one other thing. There's a couple ways I could do this, but for the sake of keeping things rolling, I'm not going to go back and open up the Bible and pick out the verses. We could do that on another time. I'm going to make mention of them. And if you want to look back at them, you can, but otherwise we burn too much time flipping through the scriptures. Okay, so Moses gets up to Mount Sinai. He gets the 10 Devarim, the 10 words, but he also is shown a pattern. Okay? He was told, make the Mishkan. Now in Hebrew, the word Mishkan is Mem, Shin, Kaf, Nun. The word Mishkan is how we translate the tabernacle in the wilderness. Moses was told to make a Mishkan according to the pattern that he was shown on the mountain. So now here's a question. Was Moses simply shown a pattern, or was there made in the heavenly dimension a Mishkan previously that Moses was shown? See this object? Okay, make it according to the object that you saw. I don't know. It says in the scriptures, make it according to the pattern. So now either Moses saw an actual object made that he copied according to its format, according to its dimensions, according to its substance, or he was simply showed some plans. Not to necessarily go there, but in the book of, I think it's in the book of Hebrews, it talks about, and I know some particular Christian denominations have this concept that Jesus, once he left the earth, is in this heavenly temple or heavenly tabernacle or heavenly Mishkan where he's doing a certain job, capacity of sacrifices and cleaning up, and we're not even going to go there. That's kind of a Seventh-day Adventist doctrine amongst some others. But my point is, some people believe that there is a heavenly Mishkan where Yeshua, Jesus, is actually in that architectural structure doing something presently. Whether or not he is not the point of this talk. What the point of this talk is, what did Moses see? If he either saw an object or he simply saw some plan, a pattern. What pattern did he see? We don't know what he saw, but we know what he made based on what he saw. This is what he made. And there's many books and studies on the Mishkan which have all kinds of interesting ramifications that I mean, just hours and hours and hours of conversation could be done about the details of the Mishkan. We're not going to go there. We're looking at the basic pattern tied to the alphabet. This is what Moses made. There was this big white fence, which I believe it stood, I think it was like about 9 feet tall. Big white fence with certain dimensions. There was no way out except for one gate. Proportionally, it was that big. And that gate had the colors. In the book of Leviticus, it mentions the colors 20-something times. I haven't done the exact count. Every time it's in the same order. And when I first thought it was an arbitrary order, but then I realized, wait a minute, every single time these colors are mentioned, it's always in the same order. Therefore, hey, maybe it means something. The embroidery was blue, purple, red, and there was white linen. This fence was made out of white linen, and the white linen, I suppose, was the lines which they then was, you might say, the structure, the warp and weave that made that gate up. And then it had also, I don't have gold, but here's some black. There was some gold threads in it. So here you have the only way into this fence was through the gate that was blue. And I'm going to this detail for a reason. I know it seems pretty trivial, but blue, purple, red, and white linen. Now, if you notice the priest's clothing, it's also made out of the same material. Inside the Mishkan, there was another structure. And it was covered with a couple different layers of things. And the embroideries within it were also the same color pattern. If you read in Exodus, where he's told what to make, he says, directly inside the gate, right inside the gate, is the altar of sacrifice. So I draw the little altar of sacrifice. It had 4 horns on the corners, and from what I understand, that's where they, I guess, tied things down. But it was a grate, like a barbecue grate. That's the altar of sacrifice. Your order of business is that when you brought a sacrifice into the tabernacle, you present it right there on the altar. That's the first business you do. Right inside, you address the altar. Halfway between the altar and the set-apart place was the laver. From my understanding, what some people say is that there was a spring of water underneath, so that this was always flowing. I've seen other pictures where it was simply like a cup or a pool that they had to constantly refill. I don't know. It makes an interesting sense that there was a spring underneath which itself was percolating up and it was coming out of that. But that's another story. Annette has to change the tape again, so we'll stop here in a moment. I'll tell you what's inside, but think of this as the het and the altar of sacrifice as the kaf, and the laver as the mem of water. You see, there's a perimeter fence, there's the grate like this hand, and then there's this pool of water. Well, we're supposed to have a break right after this. Can we run through this and then have the break if you change the tape? That way we can keep that train of thought, okay?
There's no change of tape. Lunch.
It's lunch? Well, forget it. You don't have to change the tape. Let me keep going for a few minutes. Okay? Let me get through the alphabet. Okay. Inside this is all that's outside. This is the fence, and this is the outside objects. Now, inside what's called the kadosh place, the word kadosh, kuf, dalet, shin, or there might be a vav in there, and if it's one who does, there might be a yod. We'll get to that later. In which case, this is kadesh, and if this is pronounced as an o or a u, it would be kadosh. And if this is pronounced as a y sound or an I sound, it would be kaddish, you might say. Inside here was the menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. And then there was there's the veil. And on the back side of the veil, in this place here, was the Ark of the Covenant. And I write it like that because it's basically the box and had the angel Melachim on it and their wings kind of touched. When Ron Wyatt, who claims to have been in Jerusalem and found, as he says a number of years ago, the Ark of the Covenant, he suggests that this shape here was what it looked like. So the reason I wrote this looking like that, even though in shorthand I draw it like that, is because if the day comes when it's ever found proving that Ron Wyatt was telling the truth, if that day happens and it's found to be like that, this is just there. It's these angels kind of standing as these sentries, their wings touching, forming, as it were, this throne with their wings in the background in kind of a Dalet shape above it. But that's why that's drawn like that. But so I use these shapes as kind of a shorthand to reference this Mishkan pattern. So here you have the fence with the four-colored door. Here you have the altar of sacrifice, the laver, the menorah, the table of showbread, which was a table with two piles of six loaves that were stacked, and the altar of incense, which is like 2 feet by 2 feet, and that's like the incense fumes going up, and then the Ark of the Covenant. So that's just a little shorthand version that I put together as just, again, simple little glyphs, icons, to speak of this pattern. Now, the significance of this pattern, and I'll does anybody want to quit within the next 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes? Can we keep going a little bit? Okay. The significance of this, tied to the alphabet, is that the het is a fence. It's a perimeter. It's like a sheepfold. The het and the fence of the Mishkan are one and the same. I'll qualify this all by saying this is the way I see it. So I'm not saying what is, just the way I see it. The kaf is an open hand like a grate, the drain on a floor drain has lines. It stops things from falling through. A barbecue grill is a grate. When somebody brought a sacrifice into the tabernacle, the first thing the priest did was start butchering the animal. They took its blood and put it here. They put its skin there. They put the entrails over here. They put the dung over there. They put the meat over here. They separate it out. So kaf has to do with separating. Some stuff stays on top of the grate. Some stuff goes through the grate. Kaf is a filter. Mem is water. That's water. Mem is in a container of water. It's not the thing living in the water, but the mem is basically the water. Whether it's living water or just regular water is another part of the story. Inside the set-apart place is the menorah. Well, we have a samach, but a menorah is a branched lamp which is pretty close to the paleo-samach. It's a structure that has these branches that are supported by the main post. And it's very similar to the concept of Yeshua saying, I'm the vine and you are the branches that are supposed to be bearing fruit. The ayin then, the table of showbread, the interesting thing about the word for showbread, it's in English, in the KJV, it's not S-H-O-W bread, it's S-H-E-W. Well, what is shewbread? It's like, showbread, shewbread, what? In Hebrew, it's pei, nun, yod, mem. Panim. And it's translated showbread. Well, pan is a Spanish word, and it's also a word in India. It simply means bread. But the interesting thing in Hebrew is pani is the word for face. And then when you add a yod mem at the end of the word, it actually makes it faces. So it was a table of faces? What is faces? Well, faces is what you see. And if you have different masks or different expressions, then what you see is what somebody expresses to you. And you might be masking something that you really feel. You might be showing this face or that face, like the whole theater mask of the comedy and tragedy, or You might have a motive or a certain intention, and I'm not saying that masks are a bad thing. I'm just saying there's levels of faces. So something about the table of showbread has to do with faces of who we are, or what's really going on inside, not just on the outside. The altar of incense, like pay, well, there's other verses in the scriptures that talk about the prayers of the saints are like incense. They go up before the throne of the Almighty. So the pure expression of the heart is like incense. So the pay, the mouth, has to do with talking and communicating and revealing the depths of the inside. The Ark of the Covenant, then, is the word Zadi is the name of the letter, but it's also Zadik. The word Zadik in Hebrew literally is the word for righteous. It's Zadik, Dalet, Yod, Kuf, Zadik. And it literally means righteousness. So in the Ark of the Covenant was Aaron's rod that budded. So not only is this a fish hook, but it's actually, here's Aaron's rod. All the rods were put in there, all the sticks, right? It's a dead stick. And overnight, in order to show that Aaron was the chosen one by the Almighty to be the high priest, it sprouted. Not only did it sprout, but it leafed, it bore blossoms, and it bore fruit all at the same time. I mean, you don't get all those seasons at once. You don't get, but it did. So this, something that sprouts. Here you might have a log which burst into flame. You might have a caterpillar which turns into a butterfly and now has a wing. Anything that sprouts is a Zadi concept. So here you have a Zadi, which is righteousness, which sprouts unto bearing fruit, or like a metamorphosis, or we have this life, and then we have the eternal realm. Those are all Zadi things. Above the Ark of the Covenant, there was a pillar of fire and a pillar of smoke. So if you have a pillar, here's the Ark of the Covenant. Say it's down here. Here's the Ark of the Covenant, right? And above the Ark of the Covenant, you had this pillar of smoke going up and wafting out. And then you have a pillar of fire. To me, it's kind of like a question mark and an exclamation point. Kind of see that image. But that's the kuf. That's the line and the circle. That's the kuf. The combination of two voices, a singular and a plural, a personal and a public. Yahweh said to Moses, that's the personal. Moses then was supposed to go tell the people of Israel, that's plural. That's a kuf picture. The two voices of the line and the single, a binary code of 1 and 0. There's our letter Q. That's a kuf thing. So this pattern then, now who could come into the tabernacle? You're not allowed to just walk in. If you were in contact with anything dead, you had to first be cleansed by the ashes of the red heifer by the priest, so that you could then enter the Mishkan. So out here, outside the fence, there was another altar where here's the head of the red heifer, burned. You were washed so that you could enter. Well, we have a picture that because Yeshua was crucified outside the fence, he was put to death on the cross. Yeshua himself was the man, Vav, who was put to the weapon, Zion, to cleanse us so that we could enter the Het. That's the picture of Vav, Zion, so that we can enter the kingdom of heaven. So this picture here is a metaphorical type of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Yeshua said, behold, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. If this is that picture, then this represents the kingdom of heaven. And like I said, the only way out of it, since there's only one fence in, is the kuf, which rises up. So you might say the kuf, which is to say rise up and then spread out, is kind of a picture of eternity, of resurrection. However that plays out, which is another part of the story, we're trapped in this earth realm, which is why this is drawn as the earth realm, the black, the darkness. Within the earth realm is the light of the kingdom of heaven. such that a man who is the bridge between the light, the eternal realm of the Creator. Man is the bridge, the connection between the eternal realm and the physical earth realm. Man who can, because of the Zion, can enter the kingdom of heaven here, gets out of here to the eternal realm on the backside via the Kuf experience, which we'll go into details later. But that just explains the picture of all this, keyed to this. This is the red heifer, the cross, in the darkness. So we can get into the green pastures of the Het, and I'll explain why they're keyed to these letters later. These three keyed to that, these two keyed to that, these two keyed to that. There's a one-to-one correlation, the menorah to the samach, the ayin to the table of showbread, with the 6 loaves here and 6 loaves there, the altar of incense to the mouth, Ark of the Covenant to the Zadi. The Kuf then is the pillar of fire and smoke. And this is another part of the story, which we should break first, or do you want me to? Yeah, break. Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Yay.